I'm Dr. Alice Edwards, and I'm here with Tracy Nwanini for ADHD Out Loud, talking about ADHD and relationships. So this is going to be a Q&A session, and if anybody joins us live and texts in the Zoom chat, any questions, we'll try and address those as well. But otherwise, we're going to be addressing questions that users in the ADHD Out Loud app, which is free and available in the app stores, both Apple and Android, are able to install and download. So other people have posted questions there. So we're going to be sharing some of those questions. Tracy is going to be reading some of those questions out, and then I'll be providing some feedback and opinion on answering some of those questions.
Okay, 2 more questions because time is almost up. So I am sure my husband has ADHD, but he won't admit it. He forgets things all the time, and I feel more like his mother than his wife on some days. How can I help him admit it and get help?
That's struggling. And like we said earlier, right? If you don't admit what your problem is, you're not going to be realistically addressing the situation, right? Because he's probably just making excuses for himself rather than actually working on the real problems and trying to be a good partner, right? So there are it's called the Adult AHRS, I believe. See if I can find the link quickly, but it's an adult self-rating scale that was first funded and published by the World Health Organization, and is now, and it's been validated and considered useful enough in diagnosing ADHD in adults, right? And part of the thing is there's this old school mentality that if you weren't diagnosed as a kid, then you don't have it, right? And so part of her husband's problem might be that he's like, well, I wasn't diagnosed as a kid, so I don't have it, right? But that's not true anymore, and that's been proven now in many, many studies. So tell them that, right? There are many, many studies, and you can find some links. If you just go to scholar.google.com and Google adult ADHD, you'll see that there's all kinds of papers on it already. In ADHD Out Loud, talk about the symptoms, right? Rather than whether or not you've actually been diagnosed, right? Because we can all be different places on that kind of like neurodiverse spectrum, right? We can all be different flavors, right? Like different shades of brown hair. We're not all one shade of brown or black or blonde or whatever, right? There's like a lot of shades, right? So you can just be a little bit ADHD symptomatic, right? Let's say, without actually being significantly enough impaired with ADHD that if you went to a diagnostic psychologist, that they would diagnose you, because they would say you wouldn't necessarily meet the full criteria for diagnostic, right? But you could still be partially impaired, right? In terms of what might be affecting your relationship. So if you can convince a relationship partner to consider it from that perspective, right? And also, consider that this doesn't mean necessarily that they have to go on medication, right? But they have to understand that they really are struggling with this thing and that their behavior needs to work and improve, right? ADHD or not, the kind of behaviors they're doing need improvement. It's just that since it is potential that they have ADHD, thinking about how to improve it from the ADHD perspective might provide more effective solutions than if they just, keep trying what they're already trying, which is, what I consider the definition of crazy, right? The definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So right now, that spouse is probably acting a little crazy because they're like, oh, I'm fine. I'll do better tomorrow. Or it's just this week I'm busy, blah, blah, blah. They're making excuses over and over again and no real change is happening. So this relationship partner needs to try and help them co-work on this problem from a different angle. So yes, they do need to get them on board with admitting what it is they're struggling with. So you can use the diagnostic criteria to see if it's those kind of challenges. Just keep in mind, like I said, that those diagnostic challenges have to be present in 2 more areas of life for it to be considered something that is possibly diagnostic of adult ADHD from a clinician's perspective. But from my perspective, if they're struggling enough with some of the symptomology, they could still benefit potentially from considering it an ADHD symptom that they could work to improve with their partner, right? Just in terms of just being a better partner rather than, overly worrying about whether or not they get diagnosed or see a specialist where they, would try medication or whatever. Because in many cases, those things aren't necessary if you can adapt without it. And in many cases, another reason why people might be against discussing it is because they think that they're going to be pushed down that path to medication. And if you didn't know, there's many careers where use of medications can be an inhibitor towards the jobs. For example, like in the military or piloting or anything like that, other things, whether or not you can have different job roles is somewhat limited if you're on different medications. So there's a lot of really good reasons why people might be kind of trying to steer clear around being diagnosed with anything if they think that being diagnosed or admitting that they have any symptoms might be pushing them down a path towards needing medication that they don't want. But there's many ways you can address stuff without medication if that is a manageable outcome depending on someone's unique circumstances.
Okay, great.